Now that the Broncos are back in the first round of the NFL Draft, I'm going to run through 5 draft targets for the Broncos at their biggest position of need. But the big news today for the Broncos is, well, right after they traded Bradley Chubb, the Dolphins inked him to a 5-year contract extension. We're going to talk about that extension in a little bit more detail, and I'll tell you guys why I'm a big believer that this is possibly a textbook win-win trade and why the Broncos made this trade. But first, before we get into today's show, can we pick up 20 subscribers from just this channel, this show alone? Not asking for a home run, just a little single, a nice infield single. So type me if you are one of the 20 new subscribers coming from today's episode. What's going on, Broncos country? Matthew Peterson here from Chat Sports, and Bradley Chubb is a lot richer than I am. He always was, but now he's like $110 million richer because the Dolphins have inked a new deal for their star pass rusher, and some people on Twitter are wondering, wait, why didn't the Broncos hold on to Bradley Chubb and give him that contract extension? I'll talk about it. It was never really in the cards for George Paton to give Bradley Chubb $100+ million. And also, had Chubb stayed with the Broncos for the rest of the season, well, this new deal that Tom Pelissero points out here, worth $110 million in new money, think about it. The Dolphins gave him that because of what he's done 8 games so far this season. Had he played the rest of the season and finished with 15 sacks, he would have commanded even more in free agency. Which means that the Broncos could not compete with this offer most likely, which they couldn't. Well, then how were they going to compete with the 130, 40, or whatever it could have been had Chubb really taken off this year? Because this is exactly why George Paton traded Bradley Chubb away. He knew that he would lose him in free agency. That was a fact. So then it came down to, does he want to put the franchise tag on him? Well, put a franchise tag on a player, you're going to make the player very upset that they're not getting even more money in free agency, and you might have a holdout situation. And then you looked around and went, well, I'm really deep at outside linebacker, and my team has much bigger needs to fill than having a plethora of pass rushers. So why don't we kill 2 birds with 1 stone? Get a first-round draft pick and get more playing time for Baron Browning and Nick Bonito and see what Randy Gregory can do when healthy. Also, remember, the Broncos, not even a year ago, just 9 months ago, 6 months ago even, gave a lot of money to Randy Gregory in free agency. And that deal right now looks like a pretty good contract by George Paton. Both are 5-year deals. The difference is the guaranteed money in Bradley Chubb's contract is almost the exact total of all the money Randy Gregory is getting in 5 years. So this is quite the bargain if you ask me. I mean, when these 2 guys were healthy and playing side by side for the first few weeks of the season, did Bradley Chubb look like he was, I don't know, $40 million better? Probably not. Now, I'm not shaming the Dolphins for making this deal because they're going to lock up a player that, when healthy, can be a top 10, top 5 pass rusher. But when is a big sentence there, big word in that sentence, because when is he healthy year in and year out? The benefits of the trade in my eyes are you already have great depth at outside linebacker, like I mentioned. So now you feel comfortable with the current casting crew of Randy Gregory, which you need Gregory to play more than 10 games a season, right? You did not give him 5 years, $70 million, which you could get out of after 2, but still just to play 2/3 of a season. You have Baron Browning. Hopefully he can return healthy soon. Nick Bonito seems to be really coming along at a great time. And then there's a guy named Jonathan Cooper who had some nice flashes last year. Plus, you get a much-needed first-rounder, and you get a much-needed first-rounder. I'm going to say that twice. The Broncos desperately needed a pick in the first or second round this year. They gave up a lot for Russell Wilson, which I was not critical at the time, but now that things aren't working out, this first-rounder from Miami via San Francisco, well, that's going to do you wonders come the NFL Draft. So let's revisit the trade details only one last time on today's show, or the rest of these shows here. The Broncos got a first-round pick from Miami, which belongs to the 49ers, so really look at it as the 49ers pick, right? Don't even think about the Dolphins lose. That's good for the Broncos. I guess in the 2024 fourth round it is, but who gives a damn about that right now? It's the Niners this year, which we'll look at in more detail later on in today's show. But who won the trade? Denver or Miami? I think it's a win-win. As lame as that sounds to say, I really do believe so. Because the Broncos were going to lose Chubb in free agency most likely / definitely anyway. They get a desperately need a first-rounder. And the Dolphins are an actual playoff push team, right? They are a legitimate playoff contender. And they pick up a premier pass rusher who's got 5.5 sacks midway through the season to help them go on a playoff run. And then I go back to these stats, which we have thrown on screen multiple times so far this season. But I think it's a really good point to reiterate. Baron Browning, Randy Gregory, and Nick Bonito made this trade possible. If the Broncos only had Randy Gregory and Jonathan Cooper and no extra depth at outside linebacker, I'm not sure Peyton pulls the trigger on this trade. But because they have guys who are in the wings ready for more playing time, well, it's a bit of a win-win. You get to see more of these guys who are surging and rising at a great time, and you get that first rounder that you so desperately need. All right, speaking of the 49ers, I told you guys we were talking about them because they are public enemy number one, sort of, right? We all should be rooting for the 49ers to lose every single Sunday because the Broncos now own their pick, and they are 4-4. And if there's one team that's unpredictable, it's Shanahan and the Niners. Kyle Shanahan quietly has a sub-500 record with the 49ers. But he's also gone to an NFC Championship game and a Super Bowl in the last 4 seasons or whatever. Now, they could go any which direction. You look at the rest of the schedule, they're 4-4. They have a bye this week, and they got some tough games. Let's just go kind of 4 games by 5 games, starting at the left-hand side of the screen. Chargers, Cardinals, Saints, Dolphins. That feels like a 2-2 stretch right there. But knowing the Niners, it also could be a 4-0 stretch. I mean, they got Christian McCaffrey rocking and rolling right now. But maybe they lose to the Chargers or at the Cardinals, one of those 2 games, and slip up maybe against the Dolphins or the Saints at home. I could see 2-2 right there. Then on the right-hand side of the screen, those 5 games, the Bucs, they look very winnable, but knowing Brady, he'll probably have them in shape come Week 14. The Seahawks, they are not an easy out. The Commanders, the Raiders, and the Cardinals, once again, I kind of look at that as 3-2, 4-2 maybe, 4-1. I think the Niners probably will squeak into the playoffs, at which point the earliest that pick could be would be, what is that now, 17, 18, something like that. So it's going to be coming down to the edge, coming down to the last minute here for the Broncos and where the Niners end up picking, which is where the Broncos end up picking. But regardless of that, no matter when the Broncos get on the clock in the first round, here are their biggest needs in my eyes, and some targets we'll look at in a moment. Number 1 is offensive line. Number 2 is also offensive line. Just in case you kind of glossed over number 1, go back to it. Number 3 is best player available at offensive line. Number 4 is defensive line. I threw a curveball at you guys right there. And 5 is back to offensive line. It has to be the offensive line. This is by far their biggest need, and they are going to lose some bad starters already this upcoming offseason. I mean, look at the projected 2023 offensive line for Denver. Garett Bolles will return hopefully in time for Week 1, but that's a scary leg injury, could be longer. Left guard Dalton Risner, he'll be a free agent, unless he wants to take some really cheap deal because he doesn't want to leave Denver. I'm guessing he's gone. Lloyd Cushenberry, he's got one more year left on his contract. He'll probably stay put at center, whether you like it or not. Quinn Meinerz will stay at right guard. And then right tackle, I really doubt Billy Turner comes back, but maybe if he plays well the rest of the season, they come to another agreement. But to me, those are 2 big holes on your offensive line. So before we look at the 5 draft targets I have identified, what position do you think the Broncos should draft? To me, it's a very easy answer. Offensive line, guard or tackle, best player available. But let me know if you differ. If you got a different position of need, let me know in the comment section. All right, let's look at my 5 draft targets and kind of talk about them in detail for a little bit here. So the first one up, and probably not going to fall to Denver, but if he does, the Northwestern tackle, Peter Skoronski, is awesome. I mean, he is one of the maulers of the Big Ten. And there's something different about Big Ten offensive linemen. I love him. Paris Johnson Jr. from Ohio State, another player that could fall towards the Broncos, or where the Niners will end up picking, which is where the Broncos will end up picking. Johnson has had starts at both right and left tackle, so that's a bit of a versatility like to see. Broderick Jones, another player to watch for as well. He's a little bit more raw as a player. That might take some time, but they love the physical attributes of him. All right, those are the 3 tackles right there. The guards now. I love Osiris Torrence. This is a absolute people-moving company type of Florida player, and this would be a great left guard plug-in for the Broncos. He transferred from Florida to from Louisiana, the Raging Cajuns, and wow. I mean, Pro Football Focus, for example, has him rated as the #1 guard in all of college football right now. And then out of USC, it's Andrew Vorhees, another offensive guard that is just at the top of the draft boards, and it's still early on in the draft process right now. So as we get closer and closer to the end of the season and mock drafts really start taking off, we'll have a better look at the upcoming draft targets for the Broncos. But those are my 5 really early on players to just keep an eye on for. If you're watching college football on Saturday and you're like, why am I watching this boring Northwestern game? Oh, yeah, it's to look at number 77 at left tackle because he might be in Denver next year. I appreciate everyone for clicking on to today's video, making us a part of your day. I'm going to sign off, and I'm going to see you guys later. Enjoy the bye week. We're not going to take our foot off the gas here, though, at the channel. We'll get you guys more Broncos content throughout the weekend.